I sit at my desk staring at my latest paycheck stub showing 60 cents per hour after my boss Gerald Matthews reduced my salary to practically nothing. As senior financial analyst at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, I had uncovered discrepancies in client billing that could destroy the company. Gerald's son Brandon, fresh from business school with zero experience, now occupies my former office while I've been demoted to a cramped storage room. Gerald expects me to quit in humiliation. Instead, I open my laptop and begin documenting every transaction flowing through the company's accounts in real time. My name is Anastasia, and 5 years ago I thought I'd found my dream job at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. Fresh out of the University of Texas with my finance degree, summa cum laude no less, I walked into this downtown Austin office building convinced I was going to change the business world. Gerald Matthews hired me personally, praising my analytical skills and promising mentorship that would fast-track my career. Back then, his handshake felt firm and trustworthy, his smile genuine as he toured me through the gleaming offices overlooking Lady Bird Lake. Those early months were everything I'd hoped for. Gerald treated me like the daughter he never had, inviting me to strategy meetings where executives twice my age deferred to my insights. I designed the company's entire financial tracking system from scratch, creating elegant algorithms that could monitor cash flow, predict market trends, and identify billing irregularities with mathematical precision. The system became Pinnacle's crown jewel, helping us win contracts with major corporations who trusted our analytical capabilities. Hartwell Industries was our first major client, a manufacturing company that needed complex cost analysis for their expansion into renewable energy components. I spent 3 months building custom reporting modules that saved them nearly $500,000 in the first quarter alone. Coastal Enterprises followed, then Summit Technologies, each drawn by our reputation for financial accuracy and strategic insight. Everything changed 6 months ago during our quarterly executive meeting. While reviewing expense reports, I noticed something peculiar. Small discrepancies at first, just a few $1,000s here and there that didn't match our standard accounting protocols. When I brought these irregularities to Gerald's attention privately, his demeanor shifted like a switch had been flipped. The warm mentor vanished, replaced by a cold stranger who dismissed my concerns as rookie paranoia. "Sometimes numbers don't align perfectly, Anastasia," he said, his voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. "Focus on your assigned tasks and stop looking for problems where none exist." But I couldn't ignore what the data was telling me. My system was designed to catch exactly these kinds of anomalies, and the patterns were becoming clearer with each passing week. Someone was creating duplicate invoices, sending identical billing statements to our 3 major clients, while routing the second payments through accounts that didn't appear in our official records. The amounts were substantial, totaling nearly $200,000 over 18 months. The harassment began slowly. Gerald started excluding me from client meetings, claiming my negative attitude might affect business relationships. He questioned every recommendation I made, undermining my credibility in front of colleagues who had previously respected my expertise. The office that had felt like home became a minefield where every interaction felt loaded with unspoken tension. Then Brandon arrived. 24 years old, driving a bright red Tesla that Daddy bought him for graduation, Brandon Matthews strolled into Pinnacle like he owned the place. Which, in a sense, he did. Gerald announced that his son would be joining our team as a senior associate despite having zero experience in financial analysis or marketing strategy. Brandon's resume consisted of a business degree from a mediocre private college, a semester studying abroad in Italy, and summers spent working at his father's golf club. The office dynamic shifted overnight. Colleagues who had once sought my input began directing questions to Brandon, even though his responses revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of basic financial principles. During his first client presentation, he confused profit margins with markup percentages, a mistake so elementary that I had to physically stop myself from correcting him in front of Hartwell's executives. Gerald's favoritism was blatant and painful to watch. He praised Brandon's fresh perspective while criticizing my overcomplicated analyses. When Brandon suggested implementing a new client tracking system that would have duplicated existing functions at enormous cost, Gerald called it innovative. When I pointed out the redundancy and budget implications, Gerald accused me of being resistant to change. The final blow came 3 weeks ago. Gerald called me into his office, the same space where he'd once promised to help me build my career. The warmth had completely drained from his eyes as he delivered the news that would shatter my professional world. Anastasia, we're restructuring your position. Your salary will be reduced to minimum wage effective immediately. You'll be moving to the storage room to focus on data entry tasks. 60 cents per hour. In Texas, minimum wage for tipped employees. It was a deliberate insult. A calculated humiliation designed to force my resignation without the legal complications of wrongful termination. Gerald knew I couldn't survive on that income, couldn't maintain my apartment or student loan payments, or even afford gas to drive to work. Additionally, he continued, not meeting my eyes, Brandon will be taking over your office and client relationships. His educational background makes him better suited for strategic responsibilities. I sat there in stunned silence as Gerald handed me a cardboard box and a new employee handbook outlining my reduced duties. The storage room barely qualified as an office cramped between cleaning supplies and broken furniture, with a single window that looked out at the building's dumpsters. My beautiful analytical workstation was replaced by a folding table and an outdated computer that took 5 minutes to boot up. But Gerald made one crucial mistake in his campaign to destroy me. He forgot that I had designed every system in this company embedded with monitoring protocols that tracked all administrative changes. When he revoked my executive access, he missed the backdoor functions I had built into the financial architecture security features that allowed me to observe transaction patterns without triggering alerts. As I sit in this storage room surrounded by office supplies and the smell of industrial cleaning products, I'm not the defeated employee Gerald expects me to be. Every night after the building empties, I stay late and dig deeper into the data streams that reveal his crimes. The duplicate invoicing system isn't just theft, it's systematic fraud that could send him to federal prison for decades. Gerald thinks he's won by humiliating me and installing his incompetent son as my replacement. He expects me to quit in shame, disappearing quietly, so he can continue stealing from clients who trust our company with their financial futures. But as I document each fraudulent transaction and build my case with methodical precision, I know something Gerald doesn't. The numbers never lie, and they're about to tell a story that will destroy everything he's built on lies and stolen money. 3 weeks into my exile in the storage room, I've established a routine that would make any forensic accountant proud. Every evening at 6:30, I watch from my tiny window as Gerald's BMW disappears from the parking garage, followed by Brandon's Tesla and the rest of the executive staff. By 7 o'clock, the building settles into the quiet hum of after-hours maintenance and my real work begins. Janet Rodriguez, the night security guard, has become my unwitting accomplice in this investigation. She's worked here for 12 years, a single mother from East Austin who takes night shifts to be home when her teenage daughter gets off school. Janet has no idea that her casual conversations about building access logs and unusual visitor patterns are providing crucial evidence for my case. That Mr. Matthews sure keeps strange hours, she mentioned last Tuesday while checking my storage room during her rounds. Been coming in weekends lately, always with that briefcase of his. Yesterday, he had some fancy-dressed man with him, real nervous type, who kept looking around like he expected trouble. I filed that information away along with everything else I've been gathering through my system's hidden monitoring functions. When I designed Pinnacle's financial architecture 5 years ago, I embedded security protocols that most people would never think to look for. The system tracks not just transactions, but user behavior patterns, login times, file access histories, and even audio recordings from conference rooms equipped with our client communication software. Gerald has no idea that every conversation in his office has been archived for quality assurance purposes. The audio monitoring system I installed for client conference calls operates continuously, storing recordings in encrypted files that only system administrators can access. Since Gerald never bothered to revoke my administrative credentials, assuming my reduced access meant complete system lockout, I've been listening to weeks of incriminating discussions. The scope of his fraud is staggering. Beyond the duplicate billing scheme I initially discovered, Gerald has been inflating vendor costs by 20% across all client contracts. Every invoice from our contracted services gets padded with additional charges that he routes through shell companies he controls. Maintenance contracts, software licensing, consulting fees, even office supply purchases get marked up before being passed along to clients as legitimate business expenses. But the most shocking discovery came when I accessed his email archives through the system's backup protocols. Gerald hasn't been working alone. His personal accountant, a man named Douglas Kruger, has been helping him structure these fraudulent transactions to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. Their email exchanges read like a manual for small-scale money laundering, discussing techniques for dispersing stolen funds across multiple accounts and creating paper trails that would satisfy casual auditing. The human cost of my investigation is becoming unbearable. Marcus, my boyfriend of 2 years, has grown increasingly frustrated with my secretive behavior and late nights at the office. Last Friday, our argument escalated into territory we'd never explored before. "You're obsessed, Anastasia," he said, pacing around my apartment kitchen while I sat at my laptop reviewing transaction logs. "You spend more time thinking about Gerald Matthews than you do about our relationship. It's not healthy." I wanted to tell him everything to explain that I was building a case that would expose massive financial crimes and protect future victims of Gerald's theft. But the evidence was too sensitive, the legal implications too serious to risk compromising the investigation. So I sat there in silence while the man I loved accused me of emotional unavailability and mysterious behavior that he couldn't understand. "Are you having an affair?" The question hit like a physical blow. "Because I can't think of any other reason why someone would be this secretive about staying late at work every night." The irony was devastating. While Marcus suspected me of betrayal, I was actually trying to expose real betrayal that affected dozens of innocent clients. But explaining would mean revealing evidence that could be subpoenaed in future legal proceedings, potentially compromising everything I'd worked to uncover. Meanwhile, at Pinnacle, Brandon's incompetence was creating new crises daily. On his 3rd day as senior associate, he accidentally deleted critical client data while attempting to update our customer relationship management system. Reynolds Corporation had been considering a $50,000 contract for market analysis services, but Brandon's mistake corrupted their entire file, including contact information, project specifications, and months of preliminary negotiations. Gerald's response revealed everything about his character and priorities. Rather than admit his son's error to Reynolds and work to rebuild the relationship, he quietly restored the data using backup systems I had designed, then blamed the loss on technical glitches with outdated software. He even had the audacity to suggest that the incident proved we needed to invest in newer technology, proposing an expensive system upgrade that would conveniently require consulting fees paid to one of his shell companies. The emotional toll of watching this daily corruption while pretending to be a defeated, powerless employee was affecting my sleep, my appetite, my ability to concentrate on anything outside work. I found myself lying awake at 3 a.m. running through scenarios where Gerald discovered my investigation before I could complete it. The storage room felt like a prison cell where I was serving time for crimes I hadn't committed while the real criminal sat in the executive office planning his son's promotion to vice president. That promotion announcement came during last Monday's staff meeting. Gerald stood at the front of our conference room, the same space where he'd once praised my innovations and promised me a bright future, and declared that Brandon would be elevated to Vice President of Client Relations, effective immediately. "Brandon has shown remarkable insight into our clients' needs." Gerald announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been challenged. His fresh perspective and educational background make him the ideal candidate to lead our expansion into new markets. I watched my former colleagues nod approvingly, either genuinely impressed by Brandon's non-existent accomplishments or too intimidated by Gerald's power to voice dissent. The young man who couldn't distinguish between profit margins and markup percentages was being handed responsibility for relationships worth millions of dollars in annual revenue. But Gerald's greatest miscalculation was his assumption that humiliating me would eliminate the threat I posed to his criminal enterprise. As I sat in that storage room documenting every fraudulent transaction and recording every incriminating conversation, I realized he had actually given me the perfect cover for building an unshakable legal case. My reduced visibility in the company meant no one questioned my presence during off hours, no one monitored my computer usage, and no one suspected that the defeated employee they pitied was actually gathering evidence that would destroy their boss's entire operation. The most damning discovery came 3 days ago, when I accessed Gerald's calendar through the executive scheduling system. Next Friday, he has a meeting scheduled with someone listed only as DK, Final Arrangements. Based on his email history with Douglas Kruger, I suspect this meeting will finalize plans for transferring stolen funds to offshore accounts before the upcoming audit season makes continued theft too risky. But I also discovered something that filled me with cold dread. Gerald has been building a false narrative that would frame me for the financial crimes he's committed. Email drafts on his computer outline a story where I bitter about my demotion and salary reduction created the duplicate billing system as revenge against the company. He's been altering transaction timestamps to make it appear that I initiated the fraudulent processes before my access was supposedly restricted. The trap is closing, but not in the direction Gerald expects. While he prepares to destroy my reputation and possibly send me to prison for his crimes, I'm gathering evidence that will expose not just his theft, but his systematic plan to frame an innocent employee for federal financial crimes. Every number tells a story, and this story is about to have an ending that Gerald never saw coming. The 4th week of my exile brought a new level of desperation to Gerald's behavior that both terrified and encouraged me. His movements around the office became more erratic, his conversations with Brandon more hushed and urgent. Through my system's monitoring functions, I could see him working late into the evening, systematically altering database entries and deleting files that might contradict his false narrative about my supposed crimes. The audio recordings from his office revealed the depths of his paranoia and calculation. Last Tuesday evening, after most staff had gone home, I listened through my laptop as Gerald and Brandon discussed their strategy for framing me.
"The audit team arrives Monday."
Gerald's voice crackled through the conference room speakers.
"By then, every piece of evidence needs to point toward Anastasia's guilt.
The transaction timestamps have been adjusted to show she initiated the duplicate billing processes before her demotion." Brandon's response revealed how completely he'd been corrupted by his father's influence.
What about the other employees? Some of them still think she's innocent. Innocent people don't get demoted to storage rooms, Gerald replied coldly. By the time we present our evidence, they'll realize they were fooled by someone they trusted. It'll make the betrayal feel even more personal.
The cruelty of his plan was breathtaking. Gerald wasn't just stealing money or destroying my career. He was weaponizing the trust and professional relationships I'd spent 5 years building, turning my former colleagues into unwitting accomplices in his scheme to send me to federal prison for crimes he committed. But Gerald had no idea that his audio monitoring system had been recording every word of his conspiracy. The same technology I'd installed to protect client confidentiality was now documenting his plan to commit perjury, obstruct justice, and frame an innocent employee for federal crimes. Every strategy session, every discussion of evidence manipulation, every casual mention of how much he enjoyed watching my professional destruction was preserved in digital files that would ultimately destroy him. My personal life continued deteriorating as the pressure mounted. Marcus finally reached his breaking point last Wednesday evening. I had been working late again, following digital trails that led deeper into Gerald's network of shell companies and fraudulent accounts. When I arrived home at nearly midnight, I found Marcus sitting in my living room with his jacket on car keys in his hand and an expression of resigned sadness that I'll never forget.
I can't do this anymore, Anastasia, he said quietly. I don't know who you've become, but this isn't the woman I fell in love with. You're secretive, obsessed, and completely unavailable emotionally. I feel like I'm dating a ghost. I wanted to tell him everything. The words were right there begging to be released. I could have explained about Gerald's crimes, about the evidence I was gathering, about how close I was to exposing a conspiracy that would vindicate everything I'd sacrificed. But revealing my investigation to anyone outside law enforcement could compromise the entire case and potentially make Marcus a target if Gerald discovered the security breach. So I sat there in silence while the man I loved packed his belongings and walked out of my life, leaving me alone with the terrible weight of knowledge that I couldn't share with anyone who mattered to me. The workplace isolation was equally devastating. Gerald had been systematically poisoning my professional relationships through carefully crafted rumors about my performance issues and questionable financial practices. Colleagues who once sought my expertise now avoided eye contact in hallways, treating me like a contagious disease that might damage their own careers by association. Sandra Williams, who had been my closest friend at Pinnacle, actually crossed the street last Friday when she saw me approaching during lunch break. The woman who used to call me for advice on complex analytical problems now acted as if acknowledging my existence would somehow implicate her in whatever crimes Gerald claimed I'd committed. But the most crushing blow came when I overheard a conversation between two junior analysts outside the storage room door. They were discussing whether they should remove my name from a research paper we'd collaborated on last year, worried that their professional reputations might be damaged by association with someone Gerald had labeled as untrustworthy. I heard she was stealing money through fake billing accounts, one of them whispered. Mr. Matthews says she created the whole system before they caught her. That explains why she got demoted so suddenly, the other replied. I always wondered why someone with her credentials would end up in a storage room. The irony was suffocating. The very colleagues I was trying to protect by exposing Gerald's crimes had already convicted me in their minds based on his lies. My reputation, built on 5 years of exemplary work and innovative contributions, was being systematically destroyed by the criminal I was trying to stop. Gerald's confidence reached new heights as he prepared for my final destruction. Through email monitoring, I discovered that he had scheduled a company-wide meeting for this Friday, planning to announce my termination, along with evidence of my supposed financial misconduct. He intended to present his fabricated case publicly, using my humiliation as a warning to other employees about the consequences of betraying company trust.
The evidence file he'd prepared was a masterpiece of deception. Forged transaction records showed me initiating duplicate billing processes during evening hours when few witnesses would be present. Modified email chains suggested I had been communicating with outside accomplices about transferring stolen funds. Even my own financial tracking system had been altered to make it appear that I'd built hidden functions specifically for stealing client payments. But while Gerald focused on destroying my reputation, he missed the larger picture developing around his criminal enterprise. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division had been investigating small business money laundering operations throughout Texas for over a year. Special Agent Catherine Walsh had been building cases against business owners who facilitated cash transfers for organized crime groups, following trails that led from Chicago crime families through legitimate-appearing companies like Pinnacle Marketing. 3 weeks ago, when Gerald's crimes became too large and systematic to handle alone, I made the most important decision of my professional life. Using encrypted communication protocols and anonymous reporting systems, I contacted Agent Walsh and provided preliminary evidence of the money laundering operation being conducted through our client accounts. The federal investigation that followed revealed crimes far beyond anything I had imagined. Gerald wasn't just embezzling client funds and inflating vendor costs. He was using Pinnacle Marketing as a front for laundering money from Chicago organized crime operations, processing millions of dollars through our legitimate business accounts to make illegal cash appear as honest revenue. Agent Walsh worked with me to gather additional evidence while protecting my safety and legal position. The FBI needed insider access to Gerald's computer systems and financial records information that only someone with my administrative privileges could provide. In exchange for my cooperation, I received immunity from prosecution and witness protection services if the investigation revealed threats to my safety. For 3 weeks, I've been working as an undercover informant for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, gathering evidence that will dismantle not just Gerald's local crimes, but an entire network of businesses facilitating money laundering for organized crime. The storage room that Gerald intended as my professional grave has become command central for an operation that will send him to federal prison for decades. But Gerald still doesn't know that his perfectly laid trap is about to spring on him instead of me. As he prepares for Friday's meeting where he plans to destroy my life publicly, FBI agents are finalizing search warrants and arrest procedures based on evidence I've helped them gather. The numbers never lie, and they're about to tell the truth about who the real criminal is at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. Friday morning arrived with the weight of destiny pressing down on my shoulders. I sat in the storage room surrounded by office supplies and the accumulated evidence of months of investigation, watching Gerald prepare for what he believed would be my final humiliation. Through my laptop screen, I could see him in his office rehearsing the presentation that he expected would destroy my life and cement his position as the wounded employer who discovered employee theft just in time to protect his business. At 9:30, Gerald sent a company-wide email requiring all staff to attend an emergency meeting at 10 o'clock. The subject line read, "Critical information regarding recent financial irregularities." My hands trembled slightly as I read his carefully crafted message, knowing that he intended to present fabricated evidence of my crimes to colleagues who had once respected and trusted me. But Gerald had no idea that FBI Special Agent Catherine Walsh was sitting in an unmarked vehicle outside our building, along with 2 other federal agents and a technical specialist who would assist with evidence collection. The search warrants in Agent Walsh's briefcase authorized seizure of all computer systems financial records and communications equipment related to the money laundering investigation that had been building for weeks. The conference room filled with nervous energy as employees took their seats around the polished table where I had once presented innovative financial strategies to impressed clients. Gerald stood at the head of the room with Brandon beside him, both wearing expressions of grim determination that would have been convincing if I didn't know the truth about their crimes.
"Thank you all for gathering on short notice."
Gerald began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being believed without question. "Today I must share difficult information about financial irregularities that threaten our company's integrity and reputation." He clicked his laptop, projecting a PowerPoint presentation titled, "Protecting Pinnacle Addressing Internal Financial Fraud." The first slide showed my employee photo alongside accusations of embezzlement, duplicate billing, and violation of fiduciary duty. Gasps rippled through the room as colleagues processed the allegations against someone they'd worked beside for years. Brandon stepped forward to deliver his portion of the presentation, his confidence now matching his father's as he outlined the evidence they'd fabricated. "Our investigation revealed that Anastasia created unauthorized billing systems that generated duplicate payments from major clients. The stolen funds were routed through accounts she controlled, totaling approximately $200,000 over 18 months. The room fell silent except for the hum of the projector and the sound of my heart pounding. I watched faces I'd known for 5 years turn toward me with expressions ranging from shock to disgust to pity. Sandra Williams covered her mouth with her hand, shaking her head in apparent disbelief. The junior analysts who'd questioned my credibility now looked vindicated in their suspicions. Gerald resumed control of the presentation, displaying forged transaction records and modified email chains that painted me as a sophisticated financial criminal who had exploited my administrative access to steal from trusting clients. His performance was masterful, conveying both disappointment in my betrayal and determination to protect the company from future fraud.
"Effective immediately, Anastasia's employment is terminated," Gerald announced. "We've also reported these crimes to local authorities and will cooperate fully with any investigation. Let this serve as a reminder that Pinnacle Marketing maintains zero tolerance for financial misconduct."
The moment had arrived for my response. Every person in that room expected me to break down in tears, to plead innocence, or to slink away in shame like the defeated criminal Gerald had portrayed me as. Instead, I stood calmly and walked to the front of the room, connecting my laptop to the presentation system. "Before you make any final judgments," I said, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to reveal, "I have some information that I think everyone should see." Gerald's confident expression faltered slightly as I took control of the projector.
"Anastasia, this meeting is concluded. Please gather your belongings and leave the premises immediately."
"Actually, Gerald, I think we should let everyone hear what the numbers really say." My first slide showed the actual financial records from our client accounts, displaying the real patterns of duplicate billing that Gerald had created. Unlike his fabricated evidence, these records included timestamps that couldn't be altered, digital signatures that proved authenticity, and audit trails showing exactly when and how the fraudulent transactions had been initiated. For the past 6 months, I've been investigating financial irregularities that Gerald hoped no one would discover. I continued, watching his face drain of color as the scope of my evidence became clear. These are the real transaction records showing systematic theft from Hartwell Industries, Coastal Enterprises, and Summit Technologies. Brandon started to object, but I silenced him with the next slide showing email communications between Gerald and his accomplice, Douglas Kruger. The messages outlined their money laundering operation in detail, discussing techniques for processing illegal cash through legitimate business accounts and avoiding federal detection thresholds. "Gerald hasn't just been stealing client funds," I explained to the increasingly stunned audience. "He's been using Pinnacle Marketing to launder money for organized crime operations. The duplicate billing was just cover for processing millions of dollars in illegal cash through our accounts." The room erupted in confused murmurs as employees struggled to process the magnitude of crimes their boss had been committing. Gerald attempted to regain control, claiming that my evidence was fabricated and that I was desperately trying to cover my own criminal activity. But I had saved the most damning evidence for last. I want everyone to hear something that Gerald recorded himself through our conference room audio monitoring system. The speakers crackled to life with Gerald's voice from last Tuesday evening. The audit team arrives Monday. By then, every piece of evidence needs to point toward Anastasia's guilt. The transaction timestamps have been adjusted to show she initiated the duplicate billing processes before her demotion. Brandon's voice followed. What about the other employees? Some of them still think she's innocent. Gerald's response chilled the room. Innocent people don't get demoted to storage rooms. By the time we present our evidence, they'll realize they were fooled by someone they trusted. It'll make the betrayal feel even more personal. The silence that followed was deafening. 30 colleagues who had been prepared to watch my professional execution now stared at Gerald and Brandon with expressions of horror and disbelief. The men they'd trusted to lead their company had not only committed serious crimes, but had attempted to frame an innocent employee for their own financial misconduct. Gerald's desperate damage control efforts only made his situation worse. He claimed the recordings were taken out of context, that his words had been manipulated, that I was a disgruntled employee willing to say anything to avoid consequences for my own actions. But the evidence was too comprehensive, too detailed, and too well documented for his denials to carry any credibility. That's when Agent Walsh and her team entered the conference room. Gerald Matthews and Brandon Matthews, you're under arrest for money laundering, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud, Agent Walsh announced, displaying her FBI credentials as 2 other agents moved to restrain the suspects. You have the right to remain silent. The transformation in the room was instantaneous. Colleagues who had been ready to condemn me minutes earlier now looked at me with admiration and respect. They realized that while they had been fooled by Gerald's lies, I had been risking everything to expose crimes that could have destroyed innocent clients and legitimate employees. As federal agents led Gerald and Brandon away in handcuffs, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness that I'll never forget. Justice was finally being served, but the cost had been enormous. My relationship with Marcus was over. My reputation had been temporarily destroyed, and months of my life had been consumed by the exhausting work of gathering evidence against people I'd once trusted. But watching Gerald's empire of lies collapse under the weight of truth, I knew that every sacrifice had been worthwhile. The numbers never lie, and they had finally told the story that would protect future victims from the criminals who thought they were untouchable. The FBI's search of Pinnacle Marketing revealed crimes that exceeded even my most pessimistic estimates. Agent Walsh and her team spent 3 days cataloging evidence from Gerald's office, discovering files hidden in security deposit boxes and encrypted hard drives that documented 4 years of systematic money laundering operations. The scope of his criminal enterprise was staggering, involving not just client theft, but connections to organized crime networks spanning from Chicago to Houston. Brandon's cooperation with federal investigators began within hours of his arrest. Faced with potential racketeering charges that could result in decades in federal prison, he provided detailed testimony about his father's instructions and his own role in facilitating financial crimes. His privileged background had not prepared him for the reality of federal prosecution, and his attorney quickly negotiated a plea agreement in exchange for full cooperation with the investigation. The evidence Brandon provided painted a disturbing picture of generational corruption. Gerald had been planning to transition his money laundering operation to his son, training Brandon to take over client relationships that facilitated illegal cash processing. The promotion to vice president hadn't been nepotism, but preparation for inheritance of a criminal enterprise worth millions of dollars in annual illegal revenue. During his FBI interviews, Brandon revealed that Gerald had been processing money for 3 different Chicago crime families using Pinnacle's legitimate business relationships to convert cash from drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and protection rackets into clean electronic transactions. Each of our major clients had been unknowingly participating in money laundering schemes, with Gerald manipulating their contracts to create opportunities for processing illegal funds. The human cost of Gerald's crimes became clear as investigators contacted affected clients. Hartwell Industries faced potential regulatory sanctions for unwitting participation in money laundering, even though they had been victims of Gerald's deception. Their CEO, Margaret Hartwell, flew to Austin personally to meet with federal prosecutors and express her company's commitment to cooperating with the investigation. "We trusted Pinnacle with our financial data because of Anastasia's reputation for integrity," she told Agent Walsh during their meeting. "If we had known that our payments were being used to facilitate organized crime, we would never have signed those contracts." Coastal Enterprises and Summit Technologies faced similar challenges as the investigation revealed how their legitimate business relationships had been exploited for criminal purposes. The scandal threatened to damage their own reputations and relationships with other business partners who might question their due diligence procedures. But the personal cost of my investigation was becoming clear as well, despite being vindicated by the federal charges against Gerald. Faced an uncertain professional future in a city where the financial community was relatively small and interconnected. Potential employers expressed concerns about hiring someone who had been involved in such a high-profile case, regardless of my role as the whistleblower who exposed the crimes. My savings account was nearly depleted after months of surviving on Gerald's insulting 60-cent hourly wage. Student loan payments, apartment rent, and basic living expenses had consumed the emergency fund I'd built during my years of legitimate employment. The financial stress compounded the emotional toll of losing Marcus and watching my professional relationships suffer during Gerald's campaign of character assassination. Local media attention made my situation even more complicated. While news reports correctly identified me as the financial analyst who exposed the money laundering operation, some coverage suggested that I had been motivated by revenge for my demotion rather than genuine concern for financial crimes. The narrative of a disgruntled employee seeking payback was more compelling to some reporters than the story of a professional analyst maintaining ethical standards under extreme pressure. Janet Rodriguez became an unexpected source of support during those difficult weeks. The security guard who had unknowingly provided crucial information about Gerald's after-hours activities sought me out after learning about my role in the investigation. "I knew something wasn't right about that man," she told me during a conversation in the empty lobby after one of my FBI debriefing sessions. 12 years I've worked in this building, and I've never seen someone as nervous as he got whenever unexpected visitors came by. Janet's loyalty meant more to me than recognition from former colleagues who had been quick to believe Gerald's lies about my character. She represented the working-class employees who would have suffered most if Gerald's crimes had eventually collapsed the company, destroying jobs and benefits for people who depended on Pinnacle for their livelihood. The federal investigation also revealed the broader context of Gerald's criminal network. Douglas Kruger, his accountant accomplice, had been facilitating money laundering for over a dozen small businesses throughout Texas. The techniques they used were sophisticated enough to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements while processing millions of dollars in illegal cash annually. Agent Walsh explained that Gerald's operation was part of a larger investigation into how organized crime groups were adapting to modern financial systems. Traditional money laundering through casinos and cash-intensive businesses was becoming more difficult due to enhanced federal oversight, so crime families were increasingly using legitimate-appearing professional services to clean their illegal revenue. "Your evidence broke open a case we'd been building for over 2 years,"
she told me during one of our final debriefing sessions.
The financial records you preserved documented transactions that connected Gerald to organized crime figures we'd been tracking across multiple states. The psychological toll of months spent gathering evidence while pretending to be a defeated employee was finally catching up with me. I began experiencing panic attacks triggered by unexpected phone calls or unfamiliar cars in my apartment complex parking lot. The constant stress of maintaining my cover while building a federal case had created anxiety patterns that persisted even after Gerald's arrest removed the immediate threat. Professional counseling became essential for processing the trauma of workplace betrayal and the isolation I'd experienced during the investigation. My therapist helped me understand that my decision to expose Gerald's crimes despite the personal cost reflected strength rather than the professional failure I'd begun to believe it represented. But the most unexpected development came when representatives from my former clients requested a meeting to discuss my future. Margaret Hartwell, along with executives from Coastal Enterprises and Summit Technologies, had been following the federal case closely and recognized that my ethical standards and analytical skills had protected them from even greater financial losses. Their proposal would transform my professional disaster into an opportunity I'd never imagined possible. 6 weeks after Gerald's arrest, I sat in a downtown Austin conference room that overlooked the same skyline I'd admired from my original office at Pinnacle Marketing. But this time, I wasn't facing termination or character assassination. Margaret Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Industries, had flown in from Dallas specifically to discuss a business proposition that would reshape my entire career trajectory. Anastasia, your integrity saved our companies millions of dollars and protected us from federal sanctions. She began spreading financial projections across the mahogany table. We've been discussing how to ensure this kind of fraud never threatens our operations again. David Chen, representing Summit Technologies, nodded in agreement. Traditional accounting firms focus on compliance rather than active fraud detection. What we need is someone with your analytical skills and proven ethical standards to create comprehensive financial oversight systems. The proposal they outlined was ambitious beyond anything I'd imagined during my darkest days in the storage room. They wanted me to establish an independent financial consultancy specializing in fraud detection and prevention, with their 3 companies as founding clients. The initial contracts would provide sufficient revenue to hire staff, lease office space, and build the kind of analytical infrastructure that could protect businesses from sophisticated financial crimes. Lisa Morales from Coastal Enterprises presented the financial framework they'd developed. We're prepared to commit to 3-year contracts worth $400,000 annually in combined consulting fees. That foundation should allow you to expand into additional markets while maintaining the independence necessary for objective oversight. The irony was profound. Gerald's attempt to destroy my career had actually demonstrated my value to clients who now understood the importance of having truly independent financial analysis. The skills I'd developed during my investigation, the evidence-gathering techniques I'd learned while building the federal case, and the ethical standards I'd maintained under extreme pressure had created a unique professional profile that traditional accounting firms couldn't match. But building a new business would require more than client contracts and analytical skills. I needed office space, computer systems, specialized software, and most importantly, staff members who shared my commitment to financial integrity. The challenge of recruiting qualified personnel while establishing credibility as an independent consultant seemed overwhelming. That's where Janet Rodriguez surprised me with an unexpected request. The security guard who had unknowingly assisted my investigation approached me after learning about the consulting opportunity. I know I don't have formal education in finance, she said during a coffee meeting near my apartment. But I'm good with details I learn quickly, and after 12 years watching people in that building, I can spot when someone's acting suspicious. Her request to join my new venture initially seemed impractical. Janet's background was in security rather than financial analysis, and my clients would expect staff with relevant educational credentials. But as I considered the qualities that had made my investigation successful, I realized that attention to detail, ethical integrity, and the ability to recognize suspicious behavior were more valuable than degrees from prestigious business schools. "What if we started you in administrative support and data management?" I suggested. "You could pursue accounting certification part-time while learning our analytical methods on the job. Your experience with security protocols and human behavior observation would actually be valuable for fraud detection work." Janet's enthusiasm for the opportunity reminded me why Gerald's crimes had been so personally offensive. He had exploited the trust of hardworking people who depended on their employers for honest treatment and fair compensation. Building a business that protected similar employees from financial fraud felt like the most meaningful way to use the skills I'd developed during those difficult months. The legal resolution of Gerald's case provided additional vindication for my decision to expose his crimes. Federal prosecutors offered him a plea agreement that would result in 18 years in prison and restitution payments of $4 million to affected clients and the federal government. His decision to reject the plea and demand a trial would likely result in even harsher sentencing if the jury convicted him on all charges. Brandon's cooperation had earned him a more lenient arrangement. His plea agreement included 3 years of probation, 6 months of home detention, and 1,000 hours of community service focused on financial literacy education for low-income communities. The judge's sentencing statement emphasized that his cooperation with federal investigators and genuine remorse for his actions had prevented harsher punishment. But the personal cost of my investigation continued affecting my relationships and emotional well-being. Marcus reached out through mutual friends to express admiration for my courage in exposing Gerald's crimes, but acknowledged that our relationship had been damaged beyond repair by the secrecy and stress of those months. His understanding of my behavior came too late to restore the trust and intimacy we'd once shared. The isolation I'd experienced during the investigation had created social anxiety that persisted even after the immediate threat ended. Rebuilding friendships with colleagues who had initially believed Gerald's lies required patience and emotional resilience that I wasn't sure I possessed. Some relationships recovered stronger than before, but others remained permanently damaged by the suspicion and judgment I'd faced during my lowest point. Professional recognition began arriving as news of the federal case spread through Austin's business community. The Texas Small Business Association invited me to speak at their annual conference about fraud detection and whistleblower protection. The FBI presented me with a civilian commendation for my assistance in dismantling the money laundering network that had operated through Pinnacle Marketing. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Douglas Kruger, Gerald's accountant accomplice who was facing his own federal charges, sent a letter through his attorney expressing remorse for his role in the crimes and acknowledgement that my actions had prevented even greater harm to innocent clients. "Your courage in exposing these crimes saved companies and employees from losses that would have destroyed lives," his letter stated. "I hope someday to have the integrity you demonstrated during those difficult months." As I prepared to launch integrity analytics solutions from a modest office space near downtown Austin, I reflected on the transformation that Gerald's betrayal had forced upon my life. The comfortable employee position I'd lost at Pinnacle had never challenged me to develop the entrepreneurial skills and ethical leadership that my new business would require. The clients who now trusted me with their financial security weren't just purchasing analytical services. They were investing in the integrity and independence that could only come from someone who had proven willing to sacrifice everything to expose financial crimes. Gerald's attempt to destroy my career had actually created the foundation for a business built on the principles he had tried to corrupt. The numbers never lie, and they were about to tell a story of professional triumph built on ethical foundations that no criminal could undermine. 18 months after Gerald Matthews led me away from my executive office in handcuffs of humiliation, I stood in the same downtown Austin building, now wearing a badge that read CEO Integrity Analytics Solutions, as I toured potential clients through our expanded headquarters. The storage room where I'd gathered evidence of his crimes had been converted into our digital forensics laboratory, equipped with the most advanced financial analysis software available to private consultants. Our staff had grown to 15 full-time employees, including Janet Rodriguez, who had completed her accounting certification while managing our administrative operations with the same attention to detail she'd once applied to security protocols. Her transformation from night security guard to financial analyst represented the kind of second chances that ethical businesses could provide to dedicated employees. The conference room where Gerald had attempted to destroy my reputation now hosted weekly strategy meetings where we planned expansion into new markets across Texas and neighboring states. Our client base included 12 major corporations who valued our unique combination of analytical expertise and proven integrity. The revenue projections that had seemed optimistically ambitious during our founding discussions were being exceeded consistently as word spread about our fraud detection capabilities. Margaret Hartwell remained one of our strongest advocates, referring other business leaders who needed independent financial oversight services. Her company's experience with Gerald's money laundering operation had convinced her that traditional auditing firms couldn't provide the proactive fraud detection that modern businesses required. Integrity Analytics doesn't just review our books, she explained to a group of potential clients during one of our quarterly presentations. They actively monitor our financial systems for irregularities that could indicate fraud, embezzlement, or cybercrime. That level of protection is invaluable in today's business environment. Our success attracted attention from federal law enforcement agencies who recognize the value of private sector partners in combating financial crimes. Agent Walsh invited me to participate in FBI training programs where I taught financial crime detection techniques to agents investigating similar cases throughout the region. The skills I developed during my investigation of Gerald's crimes were now being used to train federal investigators. But the most satisfying aspect of our growth was the positive impact we were having on employees and small business owners who might otherwise become victims of financial fraud. Our educational outreach programs taught business leaders how to recognize warning signs of embezzlement and implement oversight systems that could prevent sophisticated theft schemes. Janet's community college presentations about financial crime awareness drew audiences of small business owners who couldn't afford comprehensive analytical services but needed basic fraud prevention knowledge. Her background in security combined with her newly acquired financial expertise made her an effective teacher for entrepreneurs who were vulnerable to the kind of exploitation Gerald had practiced. The legal conclusion of Gerald's case provided final vindication for the investigation that had consumed so many months of my life. After rejecting the federal plea agreement, he was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. The judge's sentencing statement emphasized the sophisticated nature of his crimes and the potential harm to innocent victims that my investigation had prevented. Mr. Matthews exploited the trust of clients, employees, and business partners to facilitate serious crimes that enriched organized crime networks. Judge Patricia Hoffman stated during the sentencing hearing, "The court notes that this criminal enterprise might have continued indefinitely without the courage and integrity demonstrated by Ms. Anastasia Reeves in exposing these crimes. Brandon's community service assignment brought an unexpected personal interaction when he was assigned to assist with financial literacy programs at the community center where Janet conducted her fraud awareness workshops. His sincere apology for his role in his father's scheme and genuine commitment to making amends through education work suggested that his experience with federal prosecution had fundamentally changed his character. "I know nothing I can say will undo the harm my father and I caused," he told me during a chance encounter at the community center. "But I want you to know that watching your integrity during that investigation changed how I think about business ethics and personal responsibility." His transformation from entitled nepotism beneficiary to someone genuinely committed to ethical business practices represented the kind of positive change that could emerge from even the most difficult circumstances. My personal life had also begun rebuilding around healthier foundations. David Chen, an FBI forensic accountant who had worked on Gerald's case, shared my commitment to financial integrity and understood the emotional toll of investigating sophisticated crimes. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared professional values rather than the romantic intensity that had characterized my previous relationship with Marcus. The professional recognition that accompanied our business success included invitations to speak at university business programs about the importance of ethical decision-making in corporate environments. My presentations emphasized that maintaining integrity during difficult circumstances wasn't just morally correct, but professionally advantageous in the long term. The skills you develop by refusing to compromise ethical standards will serve you throughout your career. I told students at the University of Texas Business School during a recent guest lecture. Employers and clients value professionals who can be trusted with sensitive information and difficult decisions. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Reynolds Corporation, the company that had lost a $50,000 contract due to Brandon's incompetence during his brief tenure at Pinnacle, contacted us to discuss comprehensive financial oversight services. Their CEO explained that they had been following our company's development and wanted to work with a consulting firm that had proven its commitment to protecting client interests. "Your reputation for integrity gives us confidence that our financial data will be handled with the highest ethical standards," their chief financial officer explained during our initial meeting. "That level of trust is essential for the kind of analytical partnership we're seeking." As I prepared for our company's second anniversary celebration, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had transformed personal and professional destruction into a thriving business built on ethical foundations. Gerald's attempt to frame me for his crimes had ultimately created opportunities that my comfortable employee position at Pinnacle could never have provided. The storage room exile that was intended to break my spirit had become the laboratory where I learned to gather evidence with scientific precision. The isolation designed to destroy my professional relationships had taught me to value integrity over popularity. The financial hardship meant to force my resignation had motivated me to build something that no corrupt boss could ever take away. Our clients trusted Integrity Analytics Solutions, not just because of our analytical capabilities, but because they knew we would never compromise ethical standards for financial gain. That reputation for integrity was worth more than any salary Gerald could have offered, and provided security that no corporate position could match. During our anniversary celebration, I stood before our staff and reflected on the journey that had brought us together. 18 months ago, I thought my career was over because I refused to ignore financial crimes. Today, we've built a business that protects other people from the kind of exploitation I experienced. That transformation proves that doing the right thing, even when it's costly, ultimately creates opportunities that compromise never could. Janet raised her glass for our traditional toast, to the numbers that never lie and to the people brave enough to tell the truth they reveal. As I looked around the room at colleagues who shared our commitment to ethical business practices, I realized that Gerald's attempt to destroy me had actually revealed my true professional calling. Building a business dedicated to protecting others from financial fraud felt like the most meaningful work I'd ever done, worth every sacrifice the journey had required. The numbers had indeed told their story, and it was a story of integrity triumphing over corruption, of courage overcoming fear, and of truth ultimately prevailing over even the most sophisticated lies. For anyone facing similar ethical dilemmas in their own workplace, I had one simple message. The temporary cost of doing the right thing is always less than the permanent price of doing the wrong thing. Have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what's right meant risking everything you'd worked to build? How did you find the courage to choose integrity over convenience, even when the personal cost seemed overwhelming? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about the challenges of maintaining ethical standards in today's competitive business environment. Thank you for following this journey with me, and I hope our story inspires you to trust that doing the right thing, no matter how difficult, will ultimately lead to opportunities and relationships built on the solid foundation of integrity. Remember, the numbers never lie, but sometimes we need the courage to listen to what they're telling us. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about overcoming workplace challenges, and share this with anyone who might need encouragement to stand up for their principles. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that matter. May you always have the strength to choose truth over convenience, and may your integrity guide you toward opportunities worthy of the principles you refuse to compromise.